want you to think of someone you know personally who one day will change the world. Please take note of this person's name. We'll need these future change makers later. Who did you envision to make powerful change? A government official, a business executive, a community leader? I wonder how many of you thought of someone who actually isn't an adult. Take a moment, imagine being the youngest person in a room full of the high-level professionals I just described. You're evaluating policies impacting millions of students and families. And you're just a kid. That kid is me, serving as a student representative to the State Board of Education and collaborating with its adult board members. Through this collaboration, we facilitate the pipeline between student voice and government policy. And through this special partnership, I contribute to the broader education landscape by helping to identify and solve its problems. To me, the most pressing issue in education and the larger society is student food insecurity. I've witnessed the burden of food insecurity. For 8 years, I lived in Mississippi when the state was ranked number 50 in national K-12 education achievement. It remains one of the worst states to live in today, with 30% of its child population living in poverty and food insecurity. School meal assistance can alleviate the impact of these issues, particularly during times of crisis. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, U.S. federal funding ensured free school meals for 2 years. In 2020 alone, 2.5 billion meals were served to students. The USDA estimates that 30 million students were receiving free meals at school until funding ended in 2022. These 30 million students were immediately impacted, particularly those from low-income families. Food insecurity among school children increased, and so did the learning barriers to educational success. The implications of school meal inaccessibility raise this question. How do we work together to create and improve support systems that are accessible to any and every student in need? Motivated by the urgency to strengthen student food security, I began working with policymakers and universal school meal advocates to support the fight against hunger. Here we are speaking to a group of elementary school students. We're hearing their perspective so that we know how to work to best support schools and their students. I brought this advocacy back to the Board of Education in addition to several student voice programs that connect youth to policymakers. Why would these kids, these minors, who have the least influence on legislation, be so impactful and important to the governmental partnership? The answer is perspective. These students are directly impacted by school meal assistance. They've actually experienced the consequences of that support being removed. As a student and a speaker at this event, I told the audience, the school administrators and staff, the politicians and the media, about the obstacles students face when they walk into school on an empty stomach. I told them how I'd heard from students in every geographic region and of all socioeconomic statuses all across the school. I told them what the students across the state told me, that simply, free school meals during the pandemic were beneficial to their health and their ability to learn. If I had talked to an adult about this matter, they probably could recite copious statistical data proving just that. But they weren't the ones as students, learning virtually from home, trying to succeed while hungry, away from the support system at school. They couldn't tell me what it was like to be a food insecure student during the global pandemic. The data reveals the severity and magnitude of this situation, but student perspectives are incredibly valuable. Hearing their stories urges leaders who are equipped to take action, to make the necessary changes for a better future. So what happens again? What happens when we bring in the kids? We get perspective to demonstrate how to support child nutrition for every student. We get perspective to help ensure equitable access to a full learning experience in schools, and so much more beyond what we can imagine at this moment. It's truly limitless. When we involve students in the action plan to resolve big problems, we also work to increase the inclusivity and visibility of student and diverse perspectives. And that's how we eliminate disparities in this society. We can't solve all our problems if we don't know about all of them. We'll find out what we're missing when we listen to the students. Essentially, age-inclusive leadership advances our social impact and redefines how we save the future. I've just shared my experience with the multi-generational collaboration in government that supports educational equity. So what can we do in the community together as students and adult mentors to make an even larger impact? Dancing Against Hunger is a successful model for this type of collaboration. I founded and managed the nonprofit Dancing Against Hunger, which provides youth with accessible dance education and opportunities for social empowerment, while enhancing food security in schools. We host events in partnership with local dance programs and food banks, where participants dance together and support families in need. I'll let you in on the secret of our success as a completely student-created and student-led group. Dancing Against Hunger is able to fulfill its mission through a multi-generational partnership. We make this happen in 3 main ways. First, we place emphasis on the local community because change should be accessible. We may think that government aid can be the solution to child hunger and other pressing social issues. But that isn't always the most effective and sustainable avenue. So when we examine solutions closer to our reach and become forward thinkers in settings that enable us to be big doers, we can move forwards and give to a greater extent. My concern about student food insecurity developed more than a year before funding ended. And because I was able to use my student perspective to anticipate the increase of student food insecurity and then engage my community in the fight against hunger at an earlier stage, there was more growth, more support, and ultimately, greater impact. Within 5 months of its founding, Dancing Against Hunger collected more than 2,500 donations for local school districts and food pantries. In addition to supporting the local community, Dancing Against Hunger works to make other organizations visible to and inclusive of those in need. At our first event, and many thereafter, Dancing Against Hunger partnered with the local school district pantry. Our executive team identified it as a vital student resource. Being the first student organization to donate directly to the pantry, we promoted its resources through appropriate channels and created partnerships with other organizations to support it. Most significantly, we contributed our perspectives as students at the pantry school to uplift our community. Our team works with our board of directors, made up of adult mentors and active community leaders, to organize these events. And when mentors like them encourage collaborative action, we can inspire other youth to achieve impactful leadership. Last and most important, we provide opportunities for student leadership development. Our age often works against us because the world was not built to accommodate and engage us as young leaders. So I made sure that Dancing Against Hunger would provide a way for students to gain leadership experience and learn how to make a positive impact in the world. Change is a ripple effect that begins on a small scale. So when we're creating change, the impacts vary by magnitude. Small change or ripples grow over time and eventually turn into waves. The impacts of waves aren't always immediate, but everyone has the potential to become a leader and make ripples that turn into waves of change. Our executive team at Dancing Against Hunger makes these smaller actions, these ripples, something as simple as collecting donations or teaching kids a dance move. What is even more powerful is by making ripples together so that the ripples turn into waves. In essence, what we have is an intergenerational, community-based approach to tackling food insecurity among school children. From my work in nonprofits and education, I know that K-12 students can be a vital force in tackling food insecurity in schools. Our waves and our impacts become sustainable when our team members apply experiences and skills gained in this organization to uplift their own communities. Outside this organization, they're empowered to help fundraise tens of thousands of dollars to impact for impactful school policies and to engage and organize for a collective cause, like child hunger. I share examples of my efforts to create social impact in hopes of inspiring other youth and adults to become advocates for positive and sustainable change. The central idea is that anyone, of anywhere, of any age, can use their experiences to fuel passion for advocacy and action. We should recognize that everyone has different issues that they're affected by and passionate about. But wherever we stand, whether that be for food security and educational equity or other social causes, effective community leadership and multi-generational collaboration are key. Because leadership is a we effort. We live in the status quo, and therefore we have the responsibility to engage today's youth and empower them to create their own ways of change. I mean, who else will run the world tomorrow? So once we have partnerships and perspectives, how do we make change that is effective and equitable? There's a barrier of doubt and a lack of credibility associated with being a young leader, limiting participation in decision-making and creating inequality in its outcomes. We can overcome this barrier by building a bridge from both sides to create inclusive opportunities for today's leaders. By encouraging passionate commitment and altruism in the community, we can become truly invested in leadership at a young age today and cultivate a larger social impact tomorrow. So please recall the changemaker you thought of at the beginning of this talk, and whether or not they were an adult. I ask you to consider another young individual, a person who has the potential to change the world. As a student and a young community leader, I ask you to reach out to that person today and begin to include them in your change-making, creating that first ripple of the wave. Or be challenged to create a new initiative and generate opportunities for tomorrow's leaders. Let's cross the lines between generations, actively blur the lines between generations and leadership, and maximize the impact of all future changemakers. Thank you.